Is Putin preparing to invade Poland? Well, with the ongoing attack on Ukraine by Putin's troops, speculations have become rife that Putin has now set his sight on Poland as the next phase to his plan to conquer all of Europe, and attacks on Polish soil may commence just any moment. And as the war in Ukraine continues, stretching well into its third month, Poles have begun joining their nation's military and packing shooting ranges just in case they might need to defend Poland from Putin, despite Poland's membership to NATO. But as it is our way here on this channel, we look beyond speculations, and we have poured hundreds of hours into digging through and studying files and cases to bring you detailed evidence of why Putin would be making a move to invade Poland after he succeeds in capturing Ukraine. But before we get into today's video, do make sure to like this video, hit the subscribe button, and smash that notification bell to receive notifications of when we post more intriguing videos about one of the most influential and most feared men in the world right now. Do leave us a comment as well, as we'd love to read your opinions on Putin's planned invasion of Poland. Now, let's dive in. Will or would Putin invade Poland? Well, this is a question that only one person on this planet can answer to at the moment, and the whole world might soon be learning of that answer not too long from now. But while Putin might be the only person who has the answer to that question right now, we believe that our diligent investigations have led us to the hardcore evidences that have pointed us accurately into the direction of what Putin's action and answer might ultimately be. As the whole world has observed, Poland has been one of the Central Eastern European countries that has been agitating the loudest about Russia's and Putin's aggression over years, with the agitation ultimately culminating into Poland openly declaring Russia a threat to NATO's eastern flank. The agitation by Poles now appear to have gone over the roof since Putin's invasion of Ukraine began in late February. And there have been series of comments by private citizens and geopolitical strategists in Poland about a possible attack on their nation, and Poland being next in line for an attack by Putin and his troops. Not even the Polish Prime Minister, Mateusz Morawiecki, has been left of this. Mateusz himself has signaled and warned about a possible attack on Polish soil by Putin on several occasions. In fact, recently while addressing a group of Polish soldiers, he said very pointedly, "What we're doing to support Ukraine is for a very simple reason. We're next." Now, taking a look back into Poland's history, you'll find that it's a checkered history of war and triumph, but mostly of disaster and despair. Poland seems to always end up being drawn into a war every 40 years or so, and has been invaded multiple times over the last few centuries, including by Russia. So the Poles, more than any European country, have become more instinctively and particularly worried about their territorial integrity. But do all of these historical pointers justify the increasing agitations by Poland's leaders and citizens? Putin's ongoing invasion of Ukraine is drastically changing how Europe thinks about its defense, particularly in the East. The government in Poland has clearly begun boosting military spending since the war on Ukraine became full-blown, in anticipation of an imminent attack by Putin. But again, could these agitations by the Poles and their increased military spending deter Putin from invading Poland as planned? Or could they cause him to back out entirely from the grand plan of destroying NATO, resurrecting the Soviet Union, and restoring Eastern Europe to how it was before the age of Western alliances? Since his war on Ukraine began, Putin's armed forces have distinguished themselves by their blatant savagery and have committed horrendous war crimes against thousands of innocent civilians. And as Putin watches Ukrainians continue to suffer, he has been actively planning his next move, deploying his ultimate weapon of choice, utmost secrecy and surprise. Now, as the whole world is gradually joining the Polish in a shared fear of an anticipated attack by Putin, this fear is especially growing stronger among the Polish armed forces, who are presently organizing themselves across the western border. If a new world war is to begin, Poland's western border with Ukraine would most likely be the front line, and the Polish military knows this. The threat of a Russian invasion continues to loom, and gets closer with each passing day. While it might still appear like a mock battle to the rest of the world, the Polish military understands fully it might be their future reality. Ukraine has for long been the buffer between Russia and Poland, but the war front is now quickly drifting like a sand dune towards Poland now that Ukraine has actually become the theater of the Russia-NATO conflict. Ukraine is being backed externally by the West, given that there can be no direct Western military involvement in Ukraine, as Ukraine is not a member of NATO. This leaves a room for Putin to further his plan of European domination, and he has been doing just that. So here's what Putin is trying to achieve by making a move on Poland. By attacking Poland, Putin would be putting Poland in the unenviable space of being right between Western Europe and Russia. This way, the ground becomes open for a full-blown war between Putin and his arch-enemy, NATO. As unlike Ukraine, NATO would be able to respond with the full force of its military in collaboration with the Polish armed forces, since Poland is a member of the organization. Polish soldiers have begun training extensively on the western border alongside their U.S. allies in a joint operation. And Poland has taken this key role that is soon to fully dawn on it extremely seriously and ramping up serious training exercises. Unsurprisingly, Poland has largely increased its defense budget by a hefty $6 billion since the attack by Putin on Ukraine began. Incredibly, the only other NATO country to spend more has been the United States. And on top of all this, Poland has also put plans underway to double the number of troops over the next 2 years. Clearly, with all of the ongoing preparations in Poland, it's evident that this country understands how much of a dictator Putin is and is clearly worried about being the next target in Putin's grand plan. As the closest NATO country to Ukraine, the largest base of support to Ukraine has been coming from Poland. Poland plays a critical role as it is at its western border with Ukraine that NATO's donated weapons are gathered before being stealthily moved into Ukraine. This crucial purpose that has made Poland indispensable to NATO and the West is what likewise made the country Putin's next prime target. Now, situations have reached a critical state, and all that's perhaps left to start a third world war is one missile fired by Putin into Poland across the western border. The fact that Putin seems to know no limits is another clear indication of an imminent attack on Poland. Footage emerged early in April on the outskirts of Kiev of massive Russian military massacre that left more than 400 civilians dead. Many Poles saw this as yet another chilling reminder of just how far Putin will go towards actualizing his plans, raising further concerns and alarm about Putin's manic unpredictability. Poland clearly understands how dangerous Putin is, given the arsenal of nuclear weapons under his control, and how he never hesitates to use them. Poland continues to intensify efforts to defend itself against Putin's aggression, and Poles all across the country are rushing to sign up for the brigade, ready to defend their country. In April of 2022, the Polish brigade recorded a historic 7-fold increase in new members in that month alone. Some war experts have likewise begun trying to predict the likely location of Putin's first attack on Poland. As expected, Putin would be sneaky as always and would most likely begin dropping a small tactical nuclear bomb around the Chernobyl site, which he would make appear look like an accident and possibly blame Ukraine for. Yes, Putin is capable of such psychopathic behavior. He would use the first attack to send a clear message to the West that he's ready for a showdown, and he's got both feet on the escalation ladder. And Putin, being who he is, can get up the ladder very quickly when the West least expect. While experts think there's still a slight chance of averting the imminent war, they are likewise very skeptical of Putin and think he could press the nuclear button. Some fear that Putin's repeated failure to capture Kiev, coupled with losing a few more grounds, might very well trigger him to go nuclear and proceed to the next phase of his plan, a phase that is strongly likely to begin with an attack on Poland. Presently, the United States paratroopers training with the Polish military on the border with Ukraine are part of 10,000-strong Allied forces in Europe. But in a sign that NATO is taking no chances whatsoever, another 40,000 have been deployed along the borders of the countries that neighbor Russia. Even NATO has become clearly worried, not just about Poland, but the entire Europe, as Putin's quest to create a new empire might see the unimaginable unfold, no matter the cost in lives and suffering. There appears to be no compromise solution, and Putin knows he's damned if he ends up losing. NATO knows this, and so does the rest of Europe. Putin wouldn't go down or back out easily without a war that'll wreak enormous destruction, all of which would no matter to Putin as long as he wins. This is purely an informational video, and we're in no way promoting or approving Putin's recent action in any way.